What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Luke here for our weekly DFS live stream. It doesn't feel like Wednesday, it feels like an early Tuesday, but nonetheless, we find ourselves on the eve of the Valspar Championship here in this live stream, going to give you guys everything you need to know for this weekend slate, whether it's weather, player pool, ownership, of course, your live questions, the main reason we do these chats. So buckle in, let's make a few lineups, let's enjoy ourselves. You can see Corey's already down in chat. He seems excited for this week, just like I am. Best night of the week. Couldn't agree more. I really enjoy making my DFS lineups as much as I actually like sweating them. And usually takes me a good 4 to 5 hours tonight. That's something I'll be doing as soon as we get off stream. So looking forward to it. Let's go ahead and hop right on into the preview for this week, which we're going to go ahead and start off. First off with a brief review of what we saw last year. Then we're going to go ahead and hop into some of the weather and, of course, our player poll for this year. But last year at the Valspar Championship was a little bit of an easier scoring year. The scoring average was close to even par. The winner actually got to 17 under par, that being Sam Burns. The lowest score we've ever had win the Valspar Championship. That probably shouldn't be expected to happen year in and year out, because we had perfect weather conditions last year. It was also relatively receptive because the course was played in May rather than its usual spot here in March. But at the same time, it's going to be a difficult golf course. The driving accuracy isn't really difficult here. You can see it's right about tour average. They're at 65.5%. Greens regulation a little bit harder to hit. The issue is that you have some pretty difficult greens, relatively long irons into these greens. And even when you're hitting the greens in regulation, which they're hard to hit to begin with, you usually left with like 20 to 30 foot putts. It's not an easy golf course to really stick things in there close. And particularly at this time of year where it tends to play, usually I'd say, I mean, we had a lot of rain here in Florida the last few days, usually plays a little bit firmer and faster. So as a result, we are looking for guys that can get up and down at least a little bit, right? You're going to have a little bit of trouble doing so. The off the tee play, you got to keep it in the short stuff to get it close to some of these pins from 175 to 200 yards. You can see the 175 to 200 yard range, it is over 20% of your shots this week. You actually have over 250 yard approach shots over 15% of the time. If you're not in the fairway hitting those shots, you have no shot of getting it close to the green. So that's why driving accuracy is important this week, even though they aren't hard to hit in general. Approach play is definitely swayed towards those longer distances. We're looking for guys that excel with those long irons. And with the putting, I've made an adjustment with this throughout the week. Earlier in the week, I was focusing on Bermuda grass putters, and maybe that was a mistake on my part. This time of year, they are overseeded, just like we saw at PGA National and TPC Sawgrass. And while some of those surfaces tend to run extremely grainy, look a lot more like Bermuda than anything, last year at the Valspar, they did look a little bit less grainy. So what I'm going to be doing is throwing Bermuda grass, I don't want to say completely out of the equation, but rather than it being half my modeling for this week, the other half being just straight shots gained total, we're actually looking at about a quarter just on shots gained putting on Bermuda, half of it on just shots gained total for putting in general, right? So just no surface type in general. And the last quarter is being used for Sawgrass greens, PGA National greens, Country Club of Austin greens, which we don't really have official shot gain data before, but we do have putting data for PGA West, TPC Southwind, and TPC San Antonio. So I believe there's one other course in there that I can't think off the top of my head, but I pulled data from 8 golf courses that use a very similar type of grass surface and adjusted my modeling a little bit. So some of the modeling you may have seen from my videos early in the week is going to look a little bit different when we get to it here in a second, but it's only going to be from the putting side of things. Let's go ahead and talk about the weather, though, which will be a factor this weekend. You can see I was already looking ahead to Friday there because that's where the real impact is going to be. Tomorrow for Thursday, it's going to be beautiful. You have 4 to 5 mile an hour winds for the entire day. And you're not really going to see a difference between morning and afternoon wave. The only difference would be with the firmness factor of these greens. Of course, with pristine greens in the morning and greens that tend to be a little bit more receptive, you usually see the morning guys do a little bit better than the afternoon guys. That'll certainly be the case on Thursday. But unfortunately, on Friday, we get a little bit of a screwball. The wind in the morning tends to lay down a little bit low. You get some weird gusts down here of 20 to 18 miles an hour around 10 a.m. And the afternoon goes up to right around 10 miles an hour. Now, I've seen a few people in the industry completely blowing this off, right? And I'm tending to side towards that a little bit more than the other side, where people are completely blowing this out of proportion. Guys, a 5 mile an hour difference, right? If it's 5 miles an hour at 9 a.m. and 10 miles an hour in the afternoon, that means almost nothing to these golfers. In fact, especially because the gusts actually calm down after the morning wave. So I'm on the side where I don't think the weather is really going to impact it at all, especially after the scar tissue that was last week. people are going to overreact like all hell to this weather. So I'm going to be on the fact where I'm just going to be playing it pretty straightforward, just playing my player pool. The guys that are modeling well, that have good recent form, that's who we're going to be targeting. I'm not going to be overreacting. Last week, I was probably the only golf tout out there to mention the fact that the AM PM stack was going to be advantageous over the PM AM stack. And if you guys remember, I was completely dumbfounded by why people thought the PM AM would be advantageous. It was quite clear to me, and it ended up playing out that way, that the other stack was the way to go. And that was the main reason that I cashed out on GPPs that week. I mean, my player pool was really shoddy at best. I had guys like Colin Morikawa in the player pool. Same thing with Patrick Cantlay, like 30, 40% of those guys. Yet I still over 3x'd my money on the week. I mean, don't say that there's not an advantage to playing PGA DFS, because if you say that, you're just full of shit. Weeks like that are a perfect example of that. And for this week, people that overreact and try to play, let's say, the PMAM stack, expecting easier conditions earlier on Friday morning, are probably going to be shooting themselves in the foot as well. So I'm going to be looking to kind of take a neutral stance on that, let everyone else kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Because last week, you saw what the chickens do with the head when the head's cut off, right? When the head of the chicken's cut off, they run around like absolute chaos, no thought process involved. So that's what we're doing with the wind and the weather for this week. Let's see. Now it says Cameron Smith winning was awesome. Absolutely agree. We had a lot of exposure there, obviously. And he's probably, well, I don't want to say probably, he's a top 5 player in the world for me now. He's somebody who, in the chat, I mentioned him as my potential number 4 player in the world down in Discord. A couple people were asking me who the top 5 talented players in the world. I said that Cam Smith was number 4 in the world. That was before he went out and won this week. Now I think he's squarely there in number 3. The only better players in the world, I would say, would be John Rahm and Colin Morikawa. Cam Smith is my 3rd best player in the world. I know it's a little bit of a hot take, but you'll see it over the next few years. The kid's an absolute stud. You can't really put a measure on somebody's intangibles, and Cameron Smith has intangibles through the roof. I mean, let alone the guy's game. The guy hits it a long way. He's one of the best putters in the world around the green. He's probably the best player in the world at this point. The only part of his game where he doesn't have it is the driving accuracy and sometimes the long irons, which, of course, he had it there at the Players' Championship. That shot on 17, guys, by the way, I was there on 17. I was right behind the tee box. I've been waiting there for some time. When he hit that shot on 17, I thought it was in the water. It hung up there for a solid 20 seconds. It felt like the wind gusted him as soon as he hit as well. From a visual standpoint, I'm sure he thought it was in the water as well. And then when it landed like 2 feet from the pin, he had that 3-footer for birdie. Honestly, unbelievable. It was pretty cool. But I'll just say that 2-3 seconds where everyone around me thought it was in the water. We were all just about to you're not going to scream, but you want to scream. It's like, no, why'd you do that? Why did you hit it to the middle of the green? But yeah, really happy that he got to do that. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of the players for this week. I'll remind you, if there's anyone you want me to do a deep dive on, just go ahead and put them down in chat. I'll make sure to cover them, especially if I skip over them, that type of thing. Just try and make sure we leave it to the price range, right? So if we're talking about the guys that are 10K plus, trying to ask questions about the guys in that price range, just so that we're not talking about guys down in the 6K range while we're focusing on guys at the top of the board, just to try and keep things a little bit more focused. So let's go ahead and start with the studs up top. And for me, it's really straightforward this week. There's guys that I like up top and a few guys that I'll be fading. Justin Thomas is one of the guys that, unfortunately, I'm fading due to opportunity cost. It's not like I don't like his game for this golf course, right? He's number 2 in my recent form rankings, number 2 at Copperhead Fit. The issue is the driving accuracy. When he gets wild off the tee, it tends to be extremely wild. He tends to miss by 30, 40 yards, not just missing fairways by 5 to 10 yards. And at Copperhead, you will be punished for those shots. There's some pretty deep wooded areas. Hitting out a pine straw isn't easy to begin with. And much like PGA National, much like the Players' Championship and what we had at TPC Sawgrass, when you miss in that pine straw, you're usually looking at bogey at best, unless you hit just some miraculous type of recovery shot. So Justin Thomas is one of my favorite players in the world. Just kind of save him for a golf course that's a little bit less penal off the tee. Victor Hovland is on the other side of that equation, right? He's going to keep himself in play. You know the driver. He's an elite accuracy guy, also elite distance. Same thing with Colin Morikawa. So that's why I'm really focusing on those 2 players up top. Both of them have elite approach games. The putting has been pretty solid for Victor Hovland of late, but especially so for Colin Morikawa, which if we go ahead and take a look at the recent form metrics, he's still gaining with the putter. That was the case last week. That's still the case even after a relatively shaky week last week at the Players. So $10,700, I'm definitely expecting him to bounce back. He was one of the casualties of that madness last week. He was somebody who played in that PM/AM stack. Of course, when my core plays come out, this is something as well that happens before we have any weather implications in mind. Even for this week, right? The core picks came out before we saw that split for Friday, right? That we're kind of going to be ignoring from a build standpoint. But that was not the case last week, right? Morikawa, we expected him to be on the better side of the draw at the beginning of the week. That was not the case by Wednesday. He still was a core pick though, right? So you can see if we were going to be overreacting, right, we probably want to be playing Colin Morikawa or Victor Hovland, right? Because they're going to quote unquote be in that afternoon wave on Friday. But like I said before, that's completely overblown. So if we're going to get slightly lower ownership on Hovland and Morikawa as well because of that weather and people overreacting, it's going to make them even better plays, in my opinion. I actually had Hovland projected for closer to 24% ownership at the beginning of today. It's down to just 21.5% now. And Colin Morikawa, he's actually gone up in ownership a little bit, but at the same time, he's still lower than Justin Thomas. He's actually just a little bit higher than even somebody like Louis Oosthuizen at 16.7% ownership, which I quite frankly don't understand. I mean, I get Louis has been pretty solid with the ball striking, but to be a $10,000 golfer among all of these other studs, he's just overpriced. He's somebody who, I mean, if he was like $9,500, he'd be much more appropriately priced, but he's also getting the ownership. He's a little bit higher priced than he should be. He's playing in the AM wave, which again, if you're going to be looking into that weather at all, some people are going to be looking at that as a negative. He's still getting a ton of ownership. So, if he was going to be like 8% owned, he was playing in the quote unquote bad wave. And I keep putting that quotation because I don't think there's going to be any split between these waves this weekend. Then we'd be talking, right? If he was like 8-9% owned. But Louis Oosthuizen, he's coming in with a good amount of ownership. So fortunately going to be a fade as well. Same thing with Terrell Hatton. I have a whole video out on that. Of course, I uploaded that earlier today. The issue with Hatton's the long irons. And this isn't just like a recent trend for Terrell Hatton. He's been bad with long irons for pretty much his whole career. So for this season specifically, from over 200, he's been pretty decent, but really bad from 175 to 200, 103 from 150 to 175. Last year, he was about 150 in all these ranges, and he was about 200 from over 200 yards. So this 48th rate, it's good to see that he's been at least a little bit better this year, but historically, not the best with his long irons. He's not a long player to begin with, so it does make a lot of sense that would be the case. And typically, the guys that are better with their wedges, like a Terrell Hatton, that's one thing we can give him there as in terms of an advantage. He's a great wedge player. They tend to not be so good with those longer irons. So I'm going to try and play him at a golf course that suits his game a little bit better. Shane Lowry, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with. He's probably not in my player pool just due to opportunity cost. I want a healthy amount of DJ, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, and Victor Hovland. All four of these guys, I think one of them wins this week, pretty much guaranteed. And I could very, very easily see two of them finishing in the top five. So I'm going to have at least 25% of all of them, probably closer to 35-40% for Hovland, close to 30-35% for Morikawa, 20-25% for Xander Schauffele, and probably close to 30% for DJ. So there's going to be lineups where I have overlap between these two players, where, of course, I'm taking two guys in that 6K range. But a majority of my lineups are just going to start with one of these guys here that are $10,200 plus. Let's see if there's any questions down in chat. Catch Me You Can says, when you get to the players, leading Lowry over Fitzpatrick, he's a top 5 proximity in the two main approach categories. So yeah, that's why I said I don't know what I'm going to do with Lowry. So he does look decent with the stats, particularly from the long iron ranges, and Fitzpatrick looks bad. So let me show you what I'm talking about. And I'm sure that you looked at this before. That's why you're saying this. Yeah, 45 from 175 to 200, 45 from 150 to 175. Down here with Fitzpatrick, right, 183, 164, 95 from over 200. He deals with the same issues as Terrell Hatton. I don't want to say it's because they're European, because, Shane Lowry is also European, but that is a trend that we've seen. Some of those longer irons, I mean, even for Tommy Fleetwood, right? I mean, the guy's not very good with the long irons. 125 from 150 to 175, 65, 93. I'm not a fan of any of them in general. But if I had to choose between Lowry and Fitzpatrick, I might side towards Fitzpatrick just because of the price tag. I mean, you're dealing with, he's $700 less. The ownership's higher. I mean, I'm not enthralled with either play. Let me just go ahead and say that. But if I had to choose between the two, I would be siding towards Fitzpatrick just because of the price difference. You can say I don't have Lowry excluded from the player pool, right? I like to see that those long irons look good. I like the fact that he's my number 3 ranked play in the entire field. But I have my concerns with Shane Lowry. I mean, he's somebody who's wildly inconsistent. I don't have a good time betting on Shane Lowry. Let's just say that. So he's not somebody that I'm ever running to the window to squeeze into lineups. Usually when I do, it doesn't go well. He's much like a Cameron Tringale to me, where the numbers are going to point to me to play him plenty of times. And a lot of times I play him and he ends up not playing well. And usually when the numbers don't point to him playing well is when he plays well. So that's the hesitation with Shane Lowry there. He's a little bit of a hard guy to figure out for me, self-admittedly. Sam Burns there at $9,600. He looked decent last week until the last, let's say, round and a half there at the Players. Couldn't hit a fairway for his life. That will be an issue this week at Valspar. So I don't like the fact that he's 15% owned, but I'm going to have right around 25%, which is going to be leveraged to the field, but nothing crazy. Brooks Koepka, probably going to be my highest leveraged play on the slate. I'm going to have like 35% Brooks Koepka. I know it's going to be extremely dangerous, extremely risky, but at the same time, there's a good shot he wins this golf tournament. I already put an outright bet on him as well. The long irons are there. He's been pretty solid on these hybrid surfaces over his career, whether it's TPC Sawgrass, which he's didn't putt that well last week, but these greens are a little bit different. They don't have that bent grass influence, so maybe he can get a little bit of better vibes there. And on the West Coast, of course, the Waste Management Phoenix Open, they had the same, it's Bermuda Grass Poa Trivalis Overseed. They had that same exact type of green surface for the Waste Management Phoenix Open at TPC Scottsdale. If we're going to have the same green type, of course, where he gained over 3 strokes putting for the field on the weekend, I believe on the first 2 days, it was over 2 strokes too. He had over 5 strokes gained for the golf tournament on the greens. That is extremely, extremely attractive. If he goes out there and he gains a bunch of strokes on the greens, does his normal thing off the tee and on approach, he wins this by like 3 or 4 strokes. Now, doesn't just win this golf tournament. He can run away with this thing. So he burned us last week, but I'm going back to it. Maybe I'm a sucker for Brooks Koepka, but the guy can win golf tournaments. Let's just say that. He has more wins than everyone in the field, right? Except for Dustin Johnson. We know that. And I guess JT has him still, but that won't be the case forever. Koepka will finally catch JT at some point in terms of wins. Let's move down a little bit further. We have Jason Kokrak, who's unexplainably chalk. I thought I was going to be unique taking Jason Kokrak. I talked about him during the Core Picks video, but it seems like everybody wants a little bit of Kokrak this week. Can't blame him. He's got some good course history. He's made the cut like every time he's came here. See, 13th, 2nd, 8th place finish, 58th. So, again, all made cuts, which is great to see. He's also somebody that's played well at Colonial. It's a course that I use as a comp here. He's played well at some other short golf courses. So even though he is long off the tee, he's definitely a bomber. Right? He gets it out there by like 310, 315 yards. He's had success at shorter golf courses. So I guess I understand why he's chalk. I just wish that he wasn't. Tommy Fleetwood at $9,100. He's at least had some decent recent form, right? He's made some cuts. He's been decent in Florida in the past. Almost won the Honda Classic. He almost won the API in the past. So why not over here at the Valspar? Matt Fitzpatrick, we kind of already talked about. I have my concerns with the long iron play, but I mean, look at the metrics, right? Him and Shane Lowry, both top 5 in the field. So there's reasons why I'm considering playing them, even though the long iron stats aren't necessarily the greatest, at least for Fitzpatrick particularly, right? Shane Lowry's got a little bit better long iron stats. But the putting for Matt Fitzpatrick, now that's really what we're writing home about. Over a shot gain per round on Bermuda grass, which isn't as important this week because we have these hybrid surfaces. But if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, which for Fitzpatrick is spread out over about 2.5 months, he's gaining across all 4 major statistical categories, most significantly on approach and with the putter. Around the greens been there. It's not always something that's there for Matt Fitzpatrick. If you take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, I believe he should be like a negative in that category. Yeah, right. So that's one thing about Matt Fitzpatrick that people falsely attribute to him. They always talk about how he's such a great short game player. He's not. He's actually pretty atrocious at chipping the golf ball. He gets that type of knack, I guess, for his putting ability, because when he's actually on the green, I mean, the guy makes literally everything. You can see he's only a slight gainer with the putter over the last 50 measured rounds. But on the European Tour, he's routinely the #1 putter on tour over there. So that's why he gets that type of reputation. Here at the Valspar Championship, you can get away with not being a solid around the green player because the greens aren't elevated. They don't have the most undulation, a little bit faster than they are curved. So guys like Matt Fitzpatrick can get away with that. So that's why he's in my player pool. We'll have to see about Lowry. If I can squeeze Lowry in, I absolutely will. Jason Day, He's another guy I don't really know what to do with, but he's not going to be in my player pool as of right now. There's guys I just like a little bit more. We talked about Fleetwood and Fitzpatrick. I think they have high upside. Bubba Watson could very easily win this golf tournament. I like his upside there. Alex Noren's played well here in the past in terms of course fit. You can see he's number 8 in the field. So somebody like a Jason Day who's played some decent golf of late. But if we take a look at just per the numbers, I mean, he looks like he should be priced in the mid 7K range at best, right? Of the guys up top in terms of the modeling, you're not going to find somebody worse on the board. And so you get the whole way down here to Charlie Hoffman, who's been dealing with the yips for the last 3 to 4 months. So if you want to take a reach, if you want to take a chance on Jason Day, I guess I could understand it. I mean, the guy was the number 1 player in the world at one point. But if you're looking at numbers, you're trying to do what the numbers and modeling are telling you to go after. I would steer very clear of somebody like him. Moving down a little bit further in the 8K range, Keegan Bradley been riding that hot streak for quite some time. I'll be there once again. He's been talked up in a video on this channel, I believe, in like 4 or 5 straight weeks. He's made the cut every single time. The performances are just getting better and better and better. To cap off the 4th place finish from last week, he might have to get a win, or at the very least a top 3. So maybe he can go out and do that. That'd be pretty cool. Webb Simpson's injured. It's something that I've seen a couple people just ignoring this week. I will have him in the player pool, but it's not like he's a safe play. I thought he was going to be much lower owned than the 13.5% I had him at as of right now. He was closer to like 7-8% at the beginning of the week. So that does make me a little bit more cautious about it, but I'm going to have like 15% Webb Simpson. So little to no leverage on the field. He's somebody that I just want in my player pool in case the injury isn't as severe as we expect. He didn't look that good at the Players' Championship, right? So obviously there's a little bit of rust there, but if that was just rust and not impact of the actual injury itself, which he's had plenty of time to recover from, he took plenty of time off to recover, it could be a great number, right? He's 60-1 to win this golf tournament. The outright number of Webb Simpson, if he's not feeling that injury anymore, is just ridiculous. He should be like 20-1 to win this golf tournament. So at $8,300, I will be taking a few shots on him, but just understand it's probably the highest risk play on the entire slate. So just know what you're getting yourself into with Webb Simpson, right? Don't be playing him expecting him to be safe. The old Webb Simpson of the past that was making the cut every single week, finishing top 25 at least every other week. He's not that same player right now, right? We just don't know what kind of player is. He might be, right? He might be that same type of guy, but we don't know for sure. Kevin Kisner is my last sleeper pick on the slate. Really do like him at that type of price tag. He's accurate off the tee. He's solid with those long iron ranges from 175 to 200 and 200 yards plus. The putting on these hybrid surfaces hasn't been the best for his career, but one thing we'll say is that's only for 12 measured rounds for Kevin Kisner. So we can give him a little bit of a break there. He's also coming in with single-digit ownership, so I'll definitely have him at that price tag. I think $8,200 is more than fair. For some reason, Russell Knox and Adam Hadwin, and I know that I don't have a big enough following to be making this type of a change on ownership, but at the beginning of the week, I had him at like 9-10%, and now I have him at like 15-16%. And of course, these are reflective of what other people are touting around the industry, that type of thing. And it's just, it's kind of annoying, right? You know, I give out these core plays and they always end up being a little bit chalkier than I thought they would be at the beginning of the week. It's okay though, right? They're solid plays. There's a reason why they made my core picks video. There's a reason why they're becoming chalk. It's because they're solid plays, right? Adam Hadman's won this event before. Russell Knox has been in insane form over the last 24 measured rounds. I mean, take a look at this. Russell Knox just absolutely inhuman with the approach play, gaining nearly a stroke per round, gaining significantly off the tee. Of course, recent champion Adam Hadwin, who also finished in the top 10 last week. Same thing with Russell Knox, coming in with good recent form, good course history, good skill set for this golf course. So I can't talk myself into a fade, right? They were core picks. We're going to stick by them for this week. But we're going to have to take like 25, maybe 20% ownership on both of them to get leverage, which never feels nice, but they are solid plays. I'll be going there. Cameron Tringale can suck a fat one. I don't like him. Christian Berzane at that $7,900. I had him closer to 16% ownership at the beginning of the week. It's just 10.8% now, so definitely came down quite a bit there. But I will be fading him at this point. He's somebody who he's been okay on the PGA Tour. I showed this during the fades video earlier today, but he hasn't been great, right? He's gaining in every statistical category, which solid. That's definitely a plus. Anyone that's gaining across all 4 categories is usually a pretty consistent player. It's just he hasn't flashed any upside. If we take a look at the recent form for him, It's up here at $7,900. It's like a 20th, a 25th, a missed cut, a few other missed cuts there in the fall swing as well, a few other top 15 finishes at the very best, but he hasn't cracked through and gotten that top 5, that win, that third, second place finish that we're looking for in GPPs. So I don't understand why he is as popular as he is. He's going to be 10% owned. That's a little bit more digestible than the 16% he was at the beginning of the week. But still, again, not somebody that I'm running to the window to play. Let's go ahead and catch up on chat. Looks like a few comments were left down there. CBO says, Koepka is a good pick. Agree, man. Definitely think he has high upside. Chris Palmer asked for a ranking of these 4 golfers. If I had to rank them, it would go Kokrak, Fitzpatrick, Kokrak, Fitzpatrick, Noren, Lowry. But I like all 4 of them. So, and in cash, it would be that same order as a GPP. If I had to pick one of them, though, so if you're trying to choose between them for a cash lineup, I would definitely go with Kokrak. Kokrak's somebody who's had a lot of success here. He's coming in with decent recent form. I mean, the shots gained metrics for him have only gotten better over the years, right? The last year and a half. He's twice the player that he was back in the day when he was finishing in the top 10 here, making all those cuts. I definitely think that I would be going to Kokrak there. Elgen says, nice video earlier today. Well, thanks for that, man. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you enjoyed the video. All right, let's move down a bit further down the board. And I'll remind you, if there's anyone you want me to do a deep dive on, just go ahead and throw them down in the chat. Aaron Wise and Brian Harmon, both solid ball strikers, both have had plenty of success down here in Florida. So I'll be going to both those players. Aaron Wise a little bit chalkier than I'd hope, but that's okay. Kevin Streelman, I don't really understand the price. Outside of the recent performance that he had, what did he end up finishing? Kevin Streelman, 22nd at the Players. He finished 16th at the Honda too, right? That's a weak field event. It was a ton of miscuts. He had a miscut at the API, miscut at the Waste Management. I believe it was 4 miscuts in a row before that as well. So it's a lot of recency bias with Kevin Streelman. You can see the numbers, especially for the longer term stuff, what we use for the course fit, still lagging way behind, right? He's number 96 in the field. That's well below where you're looking at for the number 30 priced golfer in the field. So I'll go to the guys that have been a little bit better of late that also have a similar course fit. Moving down a little bit further, we have Johnny Vegas. I know he's a popular pick this week, but I'm completely behind it. He's a solid ball striker, solid off the tee. The recent form hasn't been the greatest. He kind of just got his season started. 2 made cuts, 40th and 50th place finish, and then the missed cut last week. But he was also somebody who fell victim to the weather. So don't really want to look too much into that missed cut. Denny McCarthy's solid putter on these surfaces. He's had success at Sawgrass, also over there at PGA West. TPC Scottsdale even, he had a pretty solid putting performance a few weeks ago. So at $7,400, I think he makes some sense. Lanto Griffin, I talked up during the value picks video, also a very solid play, just consistent across the board, right? This is somebody who's gaining off the tee. He's gaining on approach, gaining with the putter. Where's he at? $7,400. Yeah, gaining off the tee, gaining on approach. Even around the green, he's gaining. So gaining across all 4 categories, but most significantly with approach, which is, again, the number 1 key stat that we're looking at. And I meant to show this before. We'll go ahead and hop over here. This is my weighting for the week. You can see approach is 28%, putting 16%. It's a combination of Bermuda, bent POA, Bermuda grass, and shots gained putting total. We have recent form in there, comp courses. I mentioned Quail Hollow on there, East Lake, Southwind. Driving accuracy is a prominent part of this model. Clubhead speed, of course, course history, right? That's what Copperhead shots gained means. And then last few stats, these aren't as impactful, but we were looking at birdie or better percentage, shots gained around the green, and then par 3 scoring because there is an extra par 3 here. Okay, with that aside, just wanted to get that in there. I meant to cover that a little bit earlier. You can see why I like Lanto Griffin, right? He's got the approach play that we're looking for, the off the tee play. He has been relatively accurate, so he's checks the box with the driving accuracy, but most importantly with the putting, right? He's a solid putter in general, particularly on Bermuda grass, and he putted well this year, both at Sawgrass and at PGA West. So I like that he checks all the boxes. Adam Svensson's an absolute stud with the iron play. Same thing with Nick Taylor. So I'll be going to both of those players. Been in much better recent form than people are giving him credit for. I'm just giving you an idea. Nick Taylor gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round. Adam Svensson gaining over 1/2 a stroke per round. So I think both of those are guys to keep an eye out for. Carlos Ortiz is an extremely high-risk player, but also a high-reward player. Anytime we get a slightly weaker than average field, like what we have this week for the Valspar Championship, and it is still below average, even though we do have like 5 or 6 real stud players. I'll go ahead and include Louis Oosthuizen in those top 6. Outside of that, it does fall off pretty quickly. The field strength is at 407 the last time I checked. It won't be official until the actual lock tomorrow morning of the golf tournament. But at the same time, in those type of golf tournaments, guys like an Adam Svensson, Carlos Ortiz that are a little bit higher risk, they can actually take down those golf tournaments, right? Whereas if it's at a major championship, even if they have their top 1 percentile type of performance, that might not be enough to outduel somebody like a Bryson DeChambeau that has this perfect game, or somebody like a Jon Rahm, for example. So even more interesting in these type of fields, particularly at that price tag. If Carlos Ortiz was coming in with form, he'd be a mid 8K golfer at the very least. He was earlier in the year when he had that good stretch of form in 2021. He had events of very similar field strength. He was like $8,500 to $8,600 and also relatively chalky. So it's very funny how quickly people forget about some of these performances or just write off some of these players. You're going to go through down stretches at times, and that's kind of what Carlos Ortiz is going through right now. But if he snaps out of it, very high upside play for these GPPs. Mito Pereira is an absolute stud. I'm not even going to talk about him. I talk about him every single week. You want to play Mito until he wins. He's going to win at some point this year for sure. Pan Kazire has been in some decent recent form, long off the tee, also relatively good on these hybrid surfaces, worth a few looks. Sahith Theegala, very similar player to Carlos Ortiz, and the fact that they're both high risk but also high reward players, even in his short stint here on the PGA Tour, has shown more than enough ability to finish in the top 10, which is what we're looking for in large field GPPs. Alex Smalley, Brendan Todd, especially Charlie Hoffman and Dalen Willett, just not really sexy plays to me. Not anyone that I'm looking to get to in my lineups. Just I really can't think of a reason I'd want to play them. That's the issue, other than driving accuracy for Brendan Todd. He's an accurate driver of the golf ball, but can't get it done with those long irons. Really leaves a lot to be desired. Joel Damon, on the other hand, is excellent with the long irons. He's not the best on tour by any means, but somebody who can get it out there. 175, 200 range, is top 50 on the PGA Tour. Let's go ahead and check the exact numbers for him. And again, it's not the largest sample size, but let's see what we got for good old Joel Damon. See, gaining on approach, but more specifically, 63 now. He was in the mid 50s earlier in the year from 175 to 200. He's 42 from 175 to 200. 100 from 200 yards plus. I would expect him to improve in that category throughout the year. But you can see in general, gets it done with those long irons, which is another reason to like Joel for this week. Scott Stallings looked pretty decent over the last 2 events, so maybe worth a few looks. Emiliano Grillo's been absolute dog shit over the last few months. But if there's anybody who can get it working with that approach play and just gain 7 or 8 strokes on approach, somebody who's good from the 200 plus yard approach range, that is Emiliano Grillo. Unfortunately, he's coming in with maybe the worst form he's ever had. He can't even gain on approach of late. Let's see what his last 24 measured rounds look like. I wouldn't imagine it's very good. Let's see. Yeah, he's losing on approach. Jesus Christ. You don't see that very often from Emiliano Grillo. This is a guy who's typically gaining over half a stroke per round on approach. So the fact that he's losing a third of a stroke per round is just ridiculous. So if you're a recent form guy, you're probably going to be playing 0% of Emiliano Grillo this weekend, but I'm going to have 5% just in case he snaps out of it, because he was, I believe, the first round leader, or very close to being the first round leader at this golf course last year. And then on day 2, completely threw it away. Still ended up making the cut, but he at least has those ceiling rounds in him. That definitely gives me a little bit of a reason to play him. Stuart Sink, I do like a whole lot. I don't know why he wasn't down as a yes. He's supposed to be. At least he was earlier in the week. I don't know how that changed on here. But yeah, Stuart Sink will be somebody I play. He's also good with the long irons. He's had success at some of the comp courses I'm looking at. A few other guys I like. We like Pat Perez coming in with good recent form. The long irons have been there. He's been gaining in every category but off the tee. So at a golf course where you're going to see guys laying back a little bit more, could be worth a few looks there for sure. We have Adam Long, David Lipsky, might be worth a few looks, particularly Adam Long. He's a high upside play. Not in my player pool as of right now, but wouldn't be surprised at all if I ended up with like 2 to 3 lineups with Adam Long. Matthew Neesmith, very accurate driver of the golf ball, very solid with shots gained approach. So somebody I'm considering. Adam Schenk, maybe just a little bit underrated for this field. So that's why he's in my player pool. We have Matt Wallace. He's much like Emiliano Grillo. If you take a look at the recent form, there might not be a worse player in this field. There's only 142 players in these rankings, and he's number 138 in terms of total model ranking. So Again, if you're a guy who just goes by the numbers, then don't play Matt Wallace. But one thing I'll say, even as a huge numbers guy myself, you can't play golf DFS just by the numbers. There's a little bit of nuance to it. You got to have a little bit of feel, just like real golf in real life. And that's the case with guys like Matt Wallace. They're going to snap out of it eventually. And when they do, he could very easily finish top 5. I mean, in terms of pedigree, if you're just dealing with career pedigree, trying to rank players on price, he'd be like an $8,500 golfer. Like legitimately, he's $1,800 too cheap for this field. Just, of course, the recent form is dictating that price. So I'll be using him, especially at just 0.9% ownership. But it's not like I'm going to have him more than 4 to 5 lineups. So keep that in mind. And I'm playing 150 lineups as well. So make sure you keep that in perspective there. Andrew Putnam at 5.2%. He's just mispriced. He's been in pretty decent recent form, making some cuts. He's a decent putter, also drives the ball relatively straight. JT Poston has had some success at this golf course in the past, also a good putter on these surfaces. Harry Higgs, also very solid with the long irons. Troy Merritt, I talked about in detail during my value pick section today. $6,600, also somebody I'll be playing quite a bit of. Straight driver of the golf ball, pretty solid with those approach numbers, particularly with the long irons. We have Charles Schwartzel. He almost won this golf tournament. So we take a look at his, actually, did Charles win this? Let's double check on this. I believe he may have won this back in the day. I'm not 100% sure of it, but 6th place, 49th, 21st. He may have won in like 2014, 2015. I'm blanking on the top of my head. There's a reason why I think he did, so I'm almost positive he did win this golf tournament. But in either scenario, though, he's a solid ball striker typically. One of these guys where, if we take a look at his long-term pedigree, is a much better player than the $6,500 price tag. So I will be playing him in hopes that he can tap into that long-term ball striking ability. Hayden Buckley has been a ball striking phenom since getting on the PGA Tour. So, of course, at a golf course where we're looking for those long irons, those ball strikers, he comes to the top of the list. Kramer Hickok, somebody I'd consider taking. Same thing with Luke Donald. Luke Donald, a relatively accurate driver of the golf ball. If we take a look at course history, you can see that, first off, Luke Donald, surprising, right? 64th, so he made the cut that year. 9th place, 54th place finish. And this is towards the latter half of his career when he already fell off. So it's not like he's gone that much worse since 2019, where he finished in the top 10. So worth a few looks, maybe in large field GPPs. Austin Smotherman, Davis Riley. Let's go ahead and talk about these two guys together. Absolutely love them down low. They're only $6,400. Both of them extremely solid ball strikers. Smotherman, a much better off the tee player than Davis Riley. But at the same time, Davis Riley's a gainer with the putter. So you get a little bit of trade-off between the two players. Both of them extremely high upside. I could see them finishing in the top 10. Wesley Bryan, this is his last start before he loses his PGA Tour card. He's had success at this golf course in the past, and he hasn't played over the last month, perhaps because he's saving himself for this golf tournament, a tournament where he's had success at in the past. He made the cut last year, finished 7th place here in 2017. I believe he needs to finish in the top 5 to secure his card, to keep his playing privileges. So I'm going to be buying in on that. Again, he's had success here. He's an accurate driver of the golf ball. With his long irons, that tends to be a spot that he excels at. So if we go down here and take a look at Wesley Bryan, you can see he's gaining with the approach play. But more specifically, he might not have a big enough sample size here. Let me double check on that for you guys. Wesley Bryan, let's see. He does have a big enough sample size. You can see he's gaining from 150 to 175. He's gaining from 175 to 200, and from the 200 plus yard range. He's a top 60 player in the world. That's something that he's always been known for. If you don't know his story, he's a trick shot artist. He used to hit a lot of stingers on YouTube, Instagram, that type of thing when they were in their infancy. And that's how he got his exposure and how he ended up actually becoming a professional golfer. So not surprised to see that he's good at those exact type of shots, those long irons, where you have to have supreme control of your club face. So I do like him at $6,300. Again, he has a lot to play for this week. James Hahn, also really good with the long irons, has had success at TPC Scottsdale, which again has the same exact type of green surface that we're going to have here for the Valspar Championship. Brendan Hagee, always a high upside play down low. He's only going to be like 1% owned too, so maybe worth a few shots on. Cameron Percy, also really solid with the long irons. If there's anything that he does well, it's hit the 175 to 200 yard and 200 plus yard approach shots, better than just about anyone else. So that's why he's number 21 in the field at Copperhead Fit. The around the green and the putting leave a lot to be desired. But like I said before, you're not going to get perfect picks down low, not when you're paying at $6,100. Another guy at $6,100 I would be taking would be Seth Reeves. Same thing with Wyndham Clark. Both of them high upside plays. Reeves, a really solid approach player. Wyndham Clark, a really solid off the tee and really solid putter. So he would need to flip the irons around to have a solid week, but that is more than possible. And finally, down at $6,000, I'm playing Kelly Craft. The guy has really good course history. It makes no sense. First off, he missed the cut here last year, so that doesn't look great, right? But 46th, 31st, 65th place finish. If Kelly Craft makes the cut, that's more than enough. I'm okay with it. If he finishes like 40th place this week, that would probably be more than enough at $6,000 to pay off, especially if that lets you, let's say, take a Hovland and a Morikawa together and they finish 1-2 in this golf tournament. That's the type of lineup you could probably make if you take somebody down there at $6,000. So like many of the guys in this range, I'm going to have maybe 2 to 3 lineups with somebody like a Kelly Craft, but the permutations you're able to get down here at $6,000 are different than the ones at $6,100, right? That $100 difference could be the difference at the end of the day. So that's why somebody like a Kelly Craft does end up slipping into the player pool. Let's go ahead and catch up on the chat, and then we'll go ahead and talk a little bit of strategy before we get out of here. Catch Me If You Can says Jim Herman, no need for a deep dive. You know he's high upside. You know the story with Jim Herman. You know what you're getting yourself into. There's like 1 or 2 times a year that I'll bet him. I'll probably wait for the Wyndham Championship, but I think I've seen crazier things done. And you said Schwartzel won. Yeah, I thought so. I don't know why it's like I know that he won, but I don't know for sure. I should trust myself a little bit more. Matthew says, late to the party. I like Nate Lashley for a long shot. Nate's decent with the long irons. He's relatively accurate off the tee. I haven't done as enough of a deep dive into him yet. The recent form's obviously been atrocious for Nate Lashley, but if you're looking at long-term stats, I definitely agree with you there. Could be somebody to look for a bounce back, much like the Matt Wallace that we talked about a little bit before. A few of those other guys have just been in atrocious form, right? Even Charles Schwartzel would be in that same type of book. If anybody's going to bounce back, right, you want to be taking the guys that have actually done it in their career. And he definitely fits that type of mold, right? He won the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Barry says, what's up, Luke? Been missing your live streams. Good luck this week. Yeah, man, it was a little bit dicey last week. I was at the golf tournament. Of course, in the middle of the day, the rounds were switching. So nothing I could really do content-wise. It felt like a whole week off, and it was only like 3 or 4 days. But yeah, I'm glad to be back to it. We'll have it this weekend for sure. And Barry says, give me some Dylan Wu for my sleeper pick this week. That's an interesting pick. I'll give you that. He's between Brandon and Dylan. They're both ballers. So I could definitely see it. Matthew says, any love for Bryce Garnett? Not in particular. I think that'd be scoreboard chasing than anything. I mean, a lot of people saw him with the near first round lead, that type of thing. I don't think this is really the best course for him to give you the best idea. Barry says, Dylan Wu price on FanDuel looks pretty suspect. Get in some of that Wu, bud. I have to see. Maybe I will. Like I said, him and his brother are both studs. Even Brandon Wu. I mean, Brandon's a G too. He's pretty solid with those long irons. I'll have to do a deep dive on him after we get off here. Actually, let's just do it right now, right? What's the difference if I do it now and later on, right? So let's go ahead and take a look. So Dylan Wu and Brandon Wu, we're going to look at both of them here. Not to be confused with Kevin Yu. He's a completely another guy. Brandon Wu down here at $6,500. Right, he hasn't been quite as hot as his brother, but if we look at Dylan Wu, he's been pretty baller of late. I don't have him on here. That's right. He was a late add to the field, so he's not on the spreadsheet. I will have to take a deep dive on him later on. I won't be able to do it right now because he was a late add to the field, but I will do that, Barry, and I will tweet it out. So if anybody on there follows me on Twitter, I'll put my deep dive of Dylan Wu, not Brandon Wu, up there. Chris Palmer says, do you like this cash lineup as Kokrak? So he's starting in the 9K range. I think that's interesting. Kokrak, Fitzpatrick, Noren, Bradley, Lanto, and Mito. I think you need to take somebody 10K plus. So that's why I said it was interesting that we're starting in the 9K range. Very well, you could see 3 or 4 of those guys, 10K plus, finish in the top 10. And if that's the case, you're looking at 10, 15, maybe even 20 to 25% ownership on those guys in cash. You might have to have them. So for me, Chris, I would probably swap out Fitzpatrick for one of the guys up top. I mean, my favorite probably would be Morikawa or Holland. It would be my number one option up top. And then I would take somebody like Keegan Bradley and then spend down either in the low 7K range or the high 6K range whatever you need to do. You might be able to get away with a low 7K range guy. You might have to take somebody in the high 6s. That's what I would change for that, Chris. Just I like the players. I just think the lineup construction could use a little bit of work there. Let's go ahead and hop into the player pool now. Well, not player pool, strategy talk. A few lineups that I'll be making for this week. Go ahead and bring up Draftkings. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make a GPP lineup, just give you an idea of some of the ownership considerations that I'll be going through when building my lineups. And then secondly, we're going to make a cash lineup. So Chris, I'll be able to show you the lineup construction I was talking about a little bit before. Let's go ahead and start off with the GPP lineup though. So in GPPs, of course, we're looking to fade ownership. We're also looking to make sure that we can beat 20 to 30,000 other people. There's lineups, especially for cash, where you're just looking to beat half the field. We're looking to have a 0.01 percentile type of performance, which for me, up top, I love the idea of going to DJ. I think he has a very solid chance of winning this golf tournament. Like I said before, extremely high upside. Also going to be one of the lowest owned guys up top. So will be somebody I have in a good amount of lineups. It also, because he's a little bit cheaper than Hovland and Morikawa, gives us slightly more flexibility with our next pick, which is going to be Brooks Koepka. I know I talked about him before. He's going to be one of my highest leveraged plays on the slate because he's so low owned. Definitely somebody I'm taking in these large field tournaments. That leaves us with $7,600 remaining per player. We could probably squeeze in at least 1 to 2 guys here in the 8K range. First one that comes to mind, I mean, I like Webb Simpson, but I think he's too risky. Let's go ahead and add Kevin Kisner in there. Talked about before how I like his skill set. Could probably take Adam Hadwin. Let's go ahead and take Hadwin over Knox just because of the price tag. That puts us at $7,100 remaining, which now we're probably looking in this mid 7K range, or at the very least, very most low 7K range, because I want to take somebody in that 6K range, especially for these large field GPPs. When you're getting somebody that's like 0.3, 0.4% owned, that goes a long way with making your lineup unique. It also lets you squeeze in an extra player that's good. So we're going ahead and take Adam Svensson. If you wanted to take the more conservative approach, you could take Svensson and then take somebody at the low 7K range. But what I want to do, like what I was saying, is be a little bit more aggressive, right? Dive into that 6K range a little bit. Let's go ahead and add Johnny Vegas in there. That puts us down at $6,800, which I might even leave a little bit of salary on the table here. And let's go down to $6,700. Let's put in Matt Wallace. So this is the type of lineup I'd be looking for in large field GPPs. This would be extremely contrarian. Highest owned play would be Dustin Johnson. Adam Hadwin would be the second highest owned play, but you're looking at single digit ownership on Koepka, Kisner, Vegas, and of course sub 1% ownership on somebody like a Matt Wallace. So if you entered this into a large field GPP, you would be pretty much guaranteed to be unique. You'd also be taking players that I think have legit winning upside. Of course, in Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka, solid, just safe plays in Kevin Kisner and Adam Hadwin, and Johnny Vegas and Matt Wallace, also pretty solid plays to go ahead and round that out. Let's go ahead and move on to a cash lineup now. So like I said before, Chris, a lot of those picks are the exact kind of people that I'm looking to take, but I do want to make sure that the lineup construction is at least a little bit more balanced. Actually, I think balance is probably the wrong word for it. You know, when most people say balanced lineup, they talk about starting in the 9K range or even the low 9s and taking all guys in the 9 and 8K range. To me, a balanced lineup is taking somebody in every price range, right? To me, that's like the most quote unquote balanced lineup. So I just wanted to go ahead and say that because like when I say a quote unquote balanced lineup, it probably means something different than what a lot of other people were saying. Because a quote unquote healthy lineup to me is one that uses every single price range, right? I think when you're taking everybody from the 9 and 8K range, it's not necessarily a healthy way to build. So go ahead and show you what this looks like. So up top, like I said, Morikawa and Hovland a little bit safer. Let's go ahead and take Victor Hovland though. Let's see if we have the type of salary to take somebody like him. For my second man in, we are looking at Jason Kokrak. I know I mentioned him before. He's made a ton of cuts here. He's coming in with pretty good recent form as well. That puts us at $7,500 remaining per player. I love Russell Knox. I love the approach play of late. He's also not too expensive. So at $7,300 remaining, we have to start being a little bit more cognizant about price, right? Because I don't want to be down into low 6s or anything like that. At the very most, I probably want to be right around $6,600 or $6,700. So we will go ahead and put Adam Hadwin there. I do like him a whole lot. He's also going to be relatively chalky, which will help us over here for the cash contest. Now we have $7,000 remaining per player. We probably want to cap ourselves off right around $7,300. That brings people into play like Adam Svensson, who's $7,200. Nick Taylor would be a decent play in a cash lineup. He's got relatively accurate off the tee, also good with the approach play. Let's see if we can fit in Lanto, though, right? Lanto is kind of a step forward from all of those plays. The recent form has been there, the course history, putting on Bermuda grass. That puts us at $6,600. And we can do it, right? Because you have a guy like Troy Merritt down here, who's an extremely consistent player, accurate off the tee. Troy Merritt and Adam Hadwin, they're pretty much the same player. They look similar too. Like if you were to put them next to each other and you'd only seen them once or twice in your life, you'd probably have a hard time distinguishing between the two players and their games. They're both short players, good with the approach play, decent putters. This is the kind of lineup I'd be going for in cash. So by taking somebody in the $6,600 range, right? I know in your lineup you had Mito Pereira as your last man in. The difference between Pereira and Merritt is minimal, right? Let's say at the end of the day, it's pretty minimal, the difference between their skill sets. But the difference between Hovland's skill set and somebody like Matt Fitzpatrick is pretty drastic, right? So that's why I'm going with this type of build instead. I do think that you want to try and get some of that win equity up top, even in a cash lineup, just because these guys are going to be 20 to 25% owned, particularly in cash contests. And one of them ends up winning and you don't have them in your lineup, it might be hard to overcome that and to beat that other 25% of the field. Let's go ahead and see if there's any questions down in chat. We'll touch on them before we get out of here. Let's see. We have Chris says, going up to Lowry isn't high enough, you think? You're getting closer, right? I think it might be a little bit too low. I might try to get that $500 difference to get up to Dustin Johnson if you're starting to get that close. But if you really like the other guys in your lineup, I don't want to talk you off of it, right? Like if that other combination of those 3 or 4 value guys is exactly who you're looking for, then yeah, it would probably be enough. But if you can find that extra $500, go and try and get a DJ. But that's all we've got here for this week. I appreciate everybody who stopped by. We will have prize picks and showdown content coming throughout the weekend. I'll have that tomorrow evening. I would expect showdown live stream right around 7 p.m. Eastern time. I would expect prize picks content somewhere around like 8:30 p.m. Same thing on Friday evening. We'll be doing that for Saturday's slate. The change is going to be for Saturday and Sunday. I will be at the event on Saturday and Sunday. I will be staying over there in Tampa Saturday night. So we will have showdown content and prize picks content. Just might be a shorter show, might be condensed down into one show, one live show, but we'll have you covered this time around. Taking the weekend off was nice over there at the Players Championship, but it was forced. would have been doing content if I could have. Of course, with the schedule of events, kind of made that impossible. But best of luck this week, guys. Good luck with all of your lineups. If you're watching this on replay and you have any questions at all, do not be shy to put them down in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you before lock tomorrow. If you're asking at like 2, 3 a.m., no guarantees that I'm getting back to you before lock at 6:50 p.m., 7 a.m., whatever it ends up being tomorrow morning. But if you can get me a question tonight, I'll do my best to get back to you. Again, good luck, guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.